today, running all kinds of things in the background. So unfortunately, you don't get to see me today. You just get to hear me. Maybe that's fortunate. I don't know, depending on your view and those sorts of things. But we'll go ahead and get started. So we have three outcomes we want to attend to today. We can identify commonly used features of Pear Deck and Flipgrid for 1 and 2, and also brainstorm some ways in which these apps might promote student engagement and learning. I want to stress the commonly used features in both of those outcomes because we have about a half hour or so for each. We're not necessarily going to do very deep dives in either app, but enough to scratch the surface and to say, for you to make an informed decision about whether or not something you want to explore further. And certainly Anissa and I are happy to explore those apps further with you as you follow up with us or we follow up with you, or if there's more learning you want to decide to do on your own. So I do want to stress the commonly used features and just that we're taking more of a survey approach to both of these apps today as you get to experience and see some of the behind the scenes workings. So our ground rules are the same as they have been, but for first timers, we'll refresh you and bring you up to speed with how our community has functioned so far. We'll begin and end on time with an eye toward ending at 4 o'clock or as close to 4 o'clock as we can. Please stay focused throughout our conversations today. There will be a lot of learning that's occurring. As you are active participants in using these apps and asking questions about how they might work and how you might use them. So please stay focused and be respectful of the conversations that we have and of the ideas that everyone has to share as they bring them to the table. You're all here as learners this afternoon, so please assume positive intent. You're all coming here for that reason to gain some more insight about these apps. So whenever we're at, and perhaps more here than in any other session, when we ask questions, it's because we want to know something more, or we're speaking to our own truth or experiences, and we want to make sure that we have a safe space for that. As we go forward, please use the chat feature for questions and responses, and we'll say more about that in just a moment. And please, as you are now, mute your microphone when you are not speaking. That helps to cut down on some of the background noise that I'm sure many of you have become familiar with over the past few weeks of distance learning. So about that chat feature, please share questions and ideas there. The back channel conversations you have will be a powerful tool, and perhaps especially in this session, because we have a variety of educators here that work at a variety of levels and subject areas, and you'll get hopefully the opportunity to spread some ideas about how things might work for you in your context, and we'll be able to see how these apps might be used across the field. The chat is also a great place to drop some questions. We will do our best to have some we do have some built-in pausing points to respond to some of those questions. We'll have a more formal Q&A session near the end. And if we can't get to your questions at either of those points during our hour together here today, we'll certainly make it a point to engage in a follow-up conversation or communication with you, whether it's a quick email, whatever the question needs is what we'll do. We do want to be upfront and let you know, though, that the chat will be saved and recorded, and that allows us to do that follow-up and any unanswered questions or comments that we may have missed as the chat goes on. It also allows us to compile some of those good ideas that come out of that back channel conversation, because as we share these ideas, sometimes what's good for the goose is good for the gander, so we can provide you a summary of a lot of the thinking and discussion that you share about these apps. So that is how we'd ask you to work with us here in the background as we engage on this learning journey this afternoon. Let's move into our warm-up. And here is our first opportunity to type some responses into the chat. Would you kindly describe your knowledge and experience with either of these apps, Pear Deck or Flipgrid, to date? You had a number of apps to choose from when you registered. These two apps were the top vote getters and the apps you wanted to know more about. And so we want to be responsive to that, but we also want to be responsive to what you already know or have already experienced with them. So please take a moment to respond to that question in the chat, and we'll take a quick survey and a quick pulse of those responses here in just a moment. And in this, I've had a chance to kind of take a quick survey as just some of the responses have come in. What are some things that you're noticing out of the chat as well?
The vast experience of folks are novices to it, especially Flipgrid. There's a couple people who have used Pear Deck a few times. I believe Vinette is using it weekly with her students. But everybody else has used Pear Deck either as a participant, like we did the last webinar, or has just dipped their toes in it at the moment.
Okay, great. That confirms my little survey. So thanks for being my second pair of eyes and ears on that. So we will go ahead and get started with that in mind. So if you are someone that's had a little bit more experience, a refresher never hurts, and hopefully we will show you a new thing or two today as we think about some of the options that Pear Deck offers. And Flipgrid will all be learners together for sure from the sounds of it. And you will all be experiencing some of that for the first time today. So I hope you have your makeup on because you will be submitting some videos here a little bit later on. But we'll get there in just a moment. So let's talk first about Pear Deck, what it is and what it does. First of all, what it does is it integrates with Google Slides or PowerPoint to allow for embedded formative assessments and discussion. And those formative assessments and discussion can either be teacher-paced, as we are about to do, or student-paced. So you could have essentially set a lesson to run, give students the link to that lesson and have them work their way through it, and Pear Deck would collect answers from them so it's much more of an asynchronous learning opportunity. How it does it is by adding an extension to Google Slides, which is just the root Pear Deck extension that allows you to edit and add some questions to Google Slides, and we'll show you how that works in just a moment. Pear Deck Power Up is another extension that's optional, but allows for some increased functionality that allows you to use animations and show off those as well as allows for the use of the teacher dashboard, which we'll show in just a moment. And the other thing that's important that I'm sure everyone wants to know is about the pricing model. Pear Deck has what I call a freemium pricing model, where they're very limited features, but still powerful features available with a free individual membership, and that is the case for everyone at the moment. During this environment we find ourselves in, Pear Deck also is offering free 90-day trials of the premium membership that has a few more features that we'll talk about here today. Those features, or that membership for an individual, cost $150 a year. So it sounds pricey, but and in fact is pricey a little bit, but it does have some powerful tools here, which we'll hopefully get to show you and experience in just a moment. And it also has enterprise solutions. So if you are a decision maker or you have the ear of decision makers in the district, and you've seen the power of Pear Deck, and you're like saying, yeah, this is something we should all do, especially as we're trying to navigate this world of blended learning. There are enterprise solutions available, but they ask you to contact them for pricing. So briefly today, I want to give you a roadmap of what we'll talk about here with Pear Deck. We'll talk about adding questions and some of the question types available to you as an educator. We'll showcase some of the template library and some options you have there. So there's some pre-made things available to you, so you don't have to start from scratch. Look what presenting looks like with the teacher dashboard and without the teacher dashboard. And some unique features that the teacher dashboard allows us to work with, as well as some of the reporting options. What does it look like for an individual takeaway, and what are some options for getting aggregate results from our students? Okay, so let's go ahead, and I'm going to stop sharing this and switch over to a Pear Deck presentation. And this is where that second device we mentioned in the flyers will be helpful, because you'll get to contribute to some of the experience that we are working on here. Let's give me just one moment, and that should be Pear Deck. Anissa, is that Pear Deck?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So the first thing that we'll ask you to do on your second device is there is a web address you see at the top of the box on my screen, joinpd.com. And when you type in that address, it'll ask you for a code. The code it will give you is QACJL to join our Pear Deck session here. Anissa, I think, has also pasted some direct links in the chat. So I'll give you just a moment to join our session here so you can experience from the student side, and then before we dive into the back end and see some of the teacher side as well. We'll give you just another moment or two. Again, that link that Anissa put in chat will be active throughout. So when this code goes away, don't panic. The code is also displayed in the upper right-hand corner. So if the code goes away from you, again, don't panic. It's still right there for you to see. So we'll go ahead and take a look at Pear Deck and some of the questions that are available to you as an educator and some of the question types you might be able to ask. And then we'll take a look at how that presentation could be built. One question that allows you to do is that allows students to submit is a drawing response. And as you can imagine, that can be pretty powerful for a lot of different concepts. In this case, all of our questions today are going to be built around building community and getting to know you. Probably one of those first most essential ingredients that we'll want to think about next year when we come back to distance learning, whatever that might look like for us. So as in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, you should see on the device that you logged into Pear Deck with, you should see a submit response button or answer this question button. Forget exactly how Pear Deck words on the student version. And you can go ahead and start drawing something you like to do for fun. I will let you go ahead and draw a few of those things. And I'm going to work some magic here in the background while you are drawing, and we'll take a look at some of your beautiful artwork. All right, I'm enjoying what I'm seeing so far. I'll go ahead and share some of those responses with you in just a moment, and show with you some of that background. And once we've gone through some more of these questions, we'll show you some of the background information here as well, and what some of the things I was able to do in the background. So we'll go ahead and preview some of these responses. And I noticed that there's one of us that really likes music. And so on the teacher dashboard, I was able to star that response and elevate that toward the top, because this was a drawing I just appreciated a little bit. But as you can imagine, starring that, you can choose responses to promote and say, this was a really good example of a response, or this might be a misconception that we want to talk more about. As I scroll down and show some more responses, another response I liked was this drawing of the beach that someone is, so someone's fond of vacation, I presume. And there are some other responses as well. So that's one thing Pear Deck does. It allows us to have anonymous responses and show those all anonymously. But from the teacher's view in the background panel, which I'll show you guys in a moment once we've gone through a few more questions, it allows us to elevate those and select certain responses we'd like our students to see and interact with. I don't want to deprive you of the opportunity to do more art, but I do want to showcase a few more questions here. So this is a written response question. So if you would please follow the same process, except this time Pear Deck is going to ask you to write a little bit. What is something that you are learning currently? And without the teacher magic, what I can do is show all of your responses at once. So I can scroll up and down, and I can see that some of us are learning how to make homemade bread. I've made a pretty good sourdough lately. I've worked on that. Some of us are learning processes for reopening districts safely, which is important at this point. A lot of us are learning new online platforms. So if I choose not to promote certain responses, we can get an aggregate and anonymous display of what's going on here. So we can get a good pulse on everything and display that pulse for our students to see. Learning how to crochet, which takes a lot of patience, which I don't have. Looking at building birdhouses, which is, and cutting wood, which is another new thing. Okay. So this is another option that Pear Deck allows for us, and probably one of the options we more commonly use in our own professional learning to really allow us some open-ended responses to some of the questions that we might ask. So I'm going to lock your screen now, so no more responses, even if you're in the middle of typing a sentence. I'll hide those responses, and then we're going to move forward into our next step, our next response, or our next type of response. So suppose we're in an earth science class, and I want to know what you're excited about, or what unit you're most unsure about. By the same token, if you click in the lower right-hand corner and you say submit a response, you'll see two icons pop up on your screen, a green kind of amorphous icon and a purple question mark. So go ahead and drag the green icon to a topic that interests you and the question mark to something you are unsure about. And as I can show you some of these responses here in the background, a lot of us are excited about volcanoes, but we're unsure about plate tectonics. And you can see that in real time where all your fingers are going. One thing to note is that these icons, we don't see where the icons move until you've actively decided to move something. So if you are someone who needed a bit of think time, it's okay to take that and make some decisions about where you want to move that. In this view, if I were to hover over your icons, I cannot see necessarily who an individual response prompts, but when I go over to the teacher view in just a moment, I would be able to see who this guy was, who's this person who might not be excited about anything, or this person who doesn't question anything for giggles. So we'd be able to take a look at that here in just a moment. So I'll lock your screen here. I'll move on to two more types of questions here.
And I'm sorry, Randy, so there was a question in the chat. So there's only, for this one, a happy face and a question mark, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so, but there are options in Pear Deck that if we wanted, and we wanted more than two options, we could give kids additional types of icons to move around.
It allows up to five draggables, so you could have 5 multiple choices. Some other common question types are pinning locations on maps, or we've used them as kind of a hot and cold meter. Or we could, you could have numbered icons where you could, sort historical events in chronology 1 through 5, or sort of process 1 through 5. So all those things are possible with the number of icons that they allow you to drag around. That's an excellent question, and thank you for asking. Also available to us are some selected response questions. Again, on the lower right, it'll ask you to select a response and go ahead and do that. So from here in projector view, again, your responses are anonymous, but we can get a good pulse of what students are thinking or feeling about, or what content they know in this area. So many of us benefit from all 3 of these, which makes a lot of sense. And some of us really are more visual learners. So that's another question type that's available to us. And again, in the teacher dashboard, we could see more individualized responses. But as far as what's being projected to us as a whole right now, it is all anonymous, which is great for protecting some student thinking and student privacy. Here's one more type of draggable, which is another way to highlight one of those features. So in this case, you just have a red dot, but you can drag it to anywhere along these continuums, or these 2 continua rather. So do you like this subject? And again, we're thinking about earth science here as our hypothetical course. Do you like this subject and is it easy for you, or do you not like it? Is it hard for you? Where might your dot fall on these continua? Okay. So another way to express some of our thinking here and get a good pulse on what students are thinking. And one more application of the draggable question. We have one more question type we want to take a look at here and before we move forward. And this is something that's a friend to a lot of our math folks. How many books did you read last summer? Not necessarily that question, but the ability to input numbers. So we could scratch out some work and put some numbers into this response here. So how many books did you read last summer? And what this view gives us a little bit of a box and whisker plot. So there's an outlier, somebody read 15 books last summer, but it also gives us some averages about where we see 4 seems to be our mode here. And there are still some more data points popping up around that. So some of these number responses give us a lot of different displays. To the best of my knowledge, when you have number responses, there are no other displays you can get from this. So you can get a good sampling of the range of numbers students are giving to you, but it doesn't necessarily ask you for a right or wrong. This is more of a survey than it is a check the answer. So if you're checking for more factual knowledge with this, it might be more appropriate. With the question that asks for a number response, a selected response question might be more appropriate. Okay. So we have 7 question types that have been available to us, and I am seeing the orange bar flashing furiously, which means there's a lot going on in chat. On this, I want to pause and give participants a voice, or for you to be their voice. What are some questions or some comments that have been coming up in chat?
Well, we've been troubleshooting a couple of folks. One of them is. Carrie, I'm not sure you may be able to describe what the struggle than I. So for instance, for the one where you had the X and the Y axes with the red dot, she could see the red dot, but I don't think she was seeing what she was supposed to do with that red dot. So it just looked like a red dot without anything else.
Okay. So that sounds like something went fuzzy in internet land between you and I, and that might have been solved by a browser refresh. Unfortunately, Carrie, at the moment, we don't have time to extensively troubleshoot that, but that is my suspicion. Where in many cases, all things internet, a refresh will help. But I apologize if we don't have time to do some more extensive troubleshooting here at the moment. Were there any other questions about the questions that we just took a look at?
I don't think so, but at this point, guys, feel free to ask either in the chat or unmute yourself. We did have a question about, so Randy, all of those types of questions that you just showed, those are all the ones that are available with a free subscription, correct?
They're all available with free subscriptions, yes. What the premium tier does is it provides access to some of the teacher dashboard features, as well as, pardon me, sorry, there's one question type that I believe is not included in the free package, which we didn't have displayed here, and that is the web integration, where you can link a website and have students display that inside, have students navigate that inside the window. So all of the ones that we took a look at here are part of the free membership.
Okay, great.
Okay. So as we move toward at the end of this session here, we've had a chance to reply and see some of those questions. What I'm going to do here as the teacher is end the session. You'll notice here that there is a link that allows me to publish student takeaways. And that's very important because the student takeaway feature, which we'll talk about here in a moment, and that is one of the premium features as well, the individual reports you're about to get, is a premium feature that allows you to see a few different things. So once it gives me a link here, I will copy this link and share it with you in chat here in just a moment. That chat will take you to a personalized Google folder for this session. Will take you directly to your responses for this session. Were I able to, and we have the time to, I could go through each of your individually generated Google Drive files and provide you individual feedback on your responses. I could also do that through the teacher dashboard as well. But in either case, the takeaways feature is something that's pretty powerful, and that gives you a record of your individual responses as well as a copy of the presentation for you to take notes with and interact with as a learner, and it's all done automatically through Pear Deck. But again, that is a premium level feature for something to think about. The other thing, and I'm going to stop sharing here for just a moment, and I want to show you some of the features of the teacher dashboard as well. So bear with me for just a moment as I switch over to that.
Okay, and while you're doing that, one of the questions that popped up in the chat was around the code. So because Randy just stopped this session, or this class, if you will, the code is no longer active that he showed us at the very beginning. Each time you have a session, it has its own unique code that Pear Deck creates. And that way, just like Randy was saying, it also allows you to have a takeaway, synthesized responses from all of your students. So we'll have the link to Pear Deck itself so that you can do more of your own exploration of it at a later time. But the code that we were using at the very beginning is solely for that one particular time. So if you were doing this like synchronously, it would be for each of those synchronous sessions you had, you would start Pear Deck, it would give you a code, and code at the end when you stopped would then give you a report, and that's what Randy's about to talk with us through.
In just one moment, I will. I wanted to show you some of the features of the teacher dashboard as well. So the teacher dashboard happens either in another browser window or another device. So starting at the top, again, the presentation looks pretty similar to what we just take a look at, where I can have access to my slide notes over here, which it will show to us. I can, if I so choose, inject a new prompt into the presentation. That they have a library of some new prompts. So if I wanted to ask a new draggable question, drag a dot, how you're feeling, and take a temperature check, we had the option to do that. We could ask you what you're wondering about the topic, or draw or type 2 things you learned at the end of class. So all those things are available from the teacher dashboard, where you can, if you see a lesson's not going quite the way you wanted, or you need more information, you can get that information pretty quickly at your fingertips by automatically adding one of those questions. Some other things that are helpful from the teacher dashboard is up in the top right, I can see my student roster. So there were 21 students in the session. I can see who's with us and who's not. I can see who signed out and how they were feeling when they started the session today. When you were in the waiting room, it asked you to give a smiley face. So I can see that Julie's having an okay day, but maybe not a great day, maybe not as great as Felicia is up here. And some other things as well. Over here, I also have the opportunity to block students from the session. So if there is someone who is giving you unruly responses, then you can certainly remove them from the session as well. As we go into individual questions, it shows me all the responses the students give, as well as who those are. So I know that Nicole really liked science. I know that Colleen really liked reading. I know that Anna also liked reading as well, but I liked Martival's depiction of music, so I was able to star that and promote that to the top of our discussion. So it was one of those responses I made an exemplar of. I have no previous relationship with Martival other than other responses here, or other webinars here. I just happen to like that, drawing a key on that. As we go down to other question types, again, I can see who responded what, so that gives me an opportunity to come back and say what students were getting it and what students were not. If I happen to have another device running parallel, I can also use that as an opportunity to follow up with students individually. In that selected response question, in the draggable question, I'm sorry, I skipped one, I can highlight individual question marks and see who responded where. So that gives me good information about how individual students are feeling. Down in the multiple or selected response question, again, I can see what students or what participants responded in each fashion. And again, with the draggable, I can see who responded where. Now, same thing with the numbers. I have a good idea, when technology cooperates, of who of who gave us which number. So those are some features of the teacher dashboard and some things that you can see there. The last thing we want to do, and for the sake of time, because I do want to make sure we do Flipgrid's due justice as well. Is the other thing Pear can do for you is it can export all of the responses that we get into one aggregate Google Sheet document. And that is also a premium feature, which I can send you a little more information about that as we go forward. So certainly if you want to keep them for posterity, that Google Sheet is a great way to see how individual students responded. But also these session records are preserved in Pear Deck as well in your sessions home tab.
Randy, I'm sorry, can you just clarify that real quick? So if you get the premium, which is the one you have to pay for, then it gives you a nice spreadsheet. But if you don't, you still have some of those responses. So can you describe that just a little bit?
Yes. So if you do not offer the premium feature, you still have the teacher dashboard view available to you while you are in that. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think. I don't know.
Okay. But what I wanted to show is if I were to go back in sessions, now that this session is ended, I could, our session is not yet populated here in Pear Deck, the one we were in. There it is now. But I could go back and I could, again, look at the results and come back to that and see what, who responded where and so on and so forth.
Okay, and I think that's the important thing that some people, that could be really helpful to people.
Yes, and I just realized I just did that without sharing my screen. So what that looked like while I was talking was this. It looked like here we go. So starting from the top, as I log in and go to my sessions tab, which you'll get from your account, I can go back to the list of all the sessions I've done. I can click on my teacher dashboard view and I can pull up that dashboard and it brings me back to all the responses that we talked about.
Okay.
So I wanted to make sure we could see that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for clarifying that, Randy.
Yes, thank you for asking me to clarify that. So let us quickly, I'm going to stop this share, come back to PowerPoint for just a moment to show you, wrap up Pear Deck briefly before we move over to Flipgrid.
So in Pear Deck, all of the slides are pre-designed and you can type in your questions, but you have to use the question type that they've already pre-designed. Great
question, Amanda. So within Google Slides or PowerPoint, wherever you choose to work, you can design the slide however you like. So let me see if I have another one pulled up that we can take a look at for a moment. Give me just a second. But for those of you that were with us on Tuesday, you were able to experience another Pear Deck app. And for everyone that was not here on Tuesday, give me one moment. I can show you. I'll share my screen here in just a minute. Okay. So this was an example of a presentation we did on Tuesday. So I built that presentation within Google Slides. And if I open up my Pear Deck add-on, I can choose to add a question wherever I want. So one of the questions we had was a written response, and I added that question by opening my Pear Deck add-on and say, Google, I want people to be able to respond to this with a written response. Or Pear Deck, I want people to respond to this with a written response. Does that help to clarify? Okay, thanks. But that's an important question. Thank you for asking that. Any other questions about Pear Deck and adding questions while I'm here before we move over to wrapping Pear Deck up?
I do have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Can you upload like a previously made slide from like PowerPoint, for example, and have it interactive through Pear Deck?
Yes. So it works, in my experience, it works best for using Google Slides to upload to your PowerPoint too. So this is exactly actually is an example of that. So we uploaded this PowerPoint to Google Slides and then edited it within Google Slides to make it interactive. Up here, what we did add to make the, because I know animations are a really important point in a lot of presentations. Pear Deck does offer an extension, a browser extension called the Pear Deck Power Up, which allows animations to come through a little more clearly than they might come through in the standard Pear Deck, the free Pear Deck app. So that is a consideration if you heavily rely on animations in your presentations.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Let us move back to the PowerPoint for just a moment, to our PowerPoint for the day for just a moment, and so we can talk a little bit about some other resources available to support you within Pear Deck. Also, two things that I want to make sure that you have available, and we'll link these to you in our follow-up email, is Pear Deck does have a great library of help videos that show you how to do everything that we talked about here today. So I know we didn't have a lot of time to do everything well. We went a mile wide and an inch deep, so the help videos are very helpful going a little bit further. The Pear Deck Orchard, which we'll give you a link to as well, is their resource library. And in that resource library, they have a lot of the templates that we just saw. So they have templates for different kinds of social studies questions to inspire some thinking, and different templates for K2 questions. And they had the template library that we looked at today, pardon me, that was the building classroom community templates. So a large variety of options to support some thinking there. One really neat thing they do have available in the Orchard is integration with Newsela or Newsela, depending on how you choose to pronounce it. I've heard it both ways. And so if your students are also using Newsela, you can, Newsela has partnered with Pear Deck and done what's called a daily deck. And in that daily deck, there is a Pear Deck assignment or Pear Deck presentation built that is linked to a specific Newsela story, and ask students to do some specific interactions with that Newsela story to process some of their learning there, which is another helpful integration and one option that's out there if you happen to be using both of those apps. So we want to pause here for a moment and wrap up some of the thinking here around Pear Deck, because there are probably lots of ideas that are going on and a lot of things that sparked for you. We want to give you a chance to get those out of your head and onto the computer screen, if you will. What are some potential applications of Pear Deck that you see in your own practice? Whether that's from the administrator facilitating faculty meetings, knowing that we might have to do that virtually later, or from a classroom teacher facilitating your class meetings, either synchronously or asynchronously. What are some different ways you could see Pear Deck being used for you?
And once you've had a moment to think about that, go ahead and put it in the Zoom chat.
And Nissa, what are some of the ideas that you are seeing popping up?
Definitely using them as, using Pear Deck as a formative assessment with distance learning, like through the WebEx or Google Meet or Zoom meetings, really to help not only check for understanding, but to check for participation as well. A couple of people are like, we need to have more PD on this as a faculty, because it is such a good way to track participation and to really check kids. And then a couple of folks were also talking about it during training and during staff meetings, because we can use it like we're doing right now with adults as well as with kids. But just that idea that this is a good way to have a two-way communication with kids and to try to engage them, even though they may not be sitting right in front of us face to face.
And so thank you for all of that thinking. Those are all great ideas. To the question and note about more PD and more training, certainly Anissa and I are happy to schedule some time with you to work with you as well. But I would be remiss if I did not say that Pear Deck also has its own PD trainers and training modules available as well. So certainly if that is of interest to you, please go ahead and pursue that. We want to, as time goes forward, and I know we are quickly approaching or past our halfway point, so which leaves us a little bit less time than we might want to get the full Pear Deck or full Flipgrid experience. So I will find a good pause point at 4, but for those of you able to stick around a little bit after 4, I promise you'll get something out of it. So let's give you a quick overview of Flipgrid, just as we did for Pear Deck, and then we'll get right into it and give you the opportunity to use Flipgrid with us. What it does is allows students to record and share video responses to teacher-assigned stimuli. So that stimuli could be a picture, it could be a photo, it could be a document, it could be a website, it could be your own video that the teacher publishes and asks students to respond to. Students can then respond either directly to the teacher, or they can respond to each other's responses to have this really robust conversation around that one stimuli. How does it do it? Through mobile apps, either on Android or iOS, or through your desktop computer, if you have a webcam available to you. And that's how Anissa and I recorded our videos that we're about to show you here. And pricing, one thing that's helpful to know is it's free. For the moment, and that's not like free just during pandemic. That's right now it's marketed as a entirely free, 100% free resource. So that is something that I know that is often on educators' minds. So that is something that we can take off the plate. Want to show you 3 common features of that. We want to show you a little bit about creating grids, which is their idea of courses. Topics within those courses, which are individual assignments or discussion questions, as well as their DISCO library, which is short for Discovery Library, but Pear Deck tries a little bit, or sorry, Flipgrid tries a little bit hard to be really cool. And so everything has a lot of jazzy language around it. We also want you to experience Flipgrid today. So we're going to ask you to join our class and respond to one of our topics. And we'll also show you some of the teacher feedback tools that are available throughout the app as well. So give me just a moment here and I will switch over to my web browser and we will explore Flipgrid for a moment. Okay, this link here, and Anissa, if you would kindly help me by posting it in chat as well, flipgrid.com/IRRE will take you to our grid. So I will not take us through the entire sign-up process today. Signing up for Flipgrid is just like signing up with any other account. So in the interest of time and respecting your experiences, we won't show you all of that. But what Flipgrid does bring you to is our first grid here, which is our IRE app demo course. So as you are able to click on that link that Anissa has dropped into chat, flipgrid.com/IRRE, you'll become a student here in our course, and we'll see you here in just a moment. And it might ask you for a few additional pieces of information, either asking you to log in with a Google account or a Microsoft account would be are the easiest single sign-on options. I'll give you just a moment or two to join us because I know it will take some time to navigate that. And then we'll move forward and show you some of the features within Flipgrid.
Right, Randy, I think we're having technical issues with some folks being able to join. So if you go to if you follow the link in the chat, or go to, flipgrid.com/IRRE, it should automatically take you through the steps of how to sign on. We hope.
And if not, your participation, while helpful today, is not paramount. We do have some backup options. So if technical difficulties are proving too insurmountable at the moment, we can certainly do this. You can certainly participate asynchronously with this as well. But we'll ask you in just a moment. I'm going to press forward and make sure you have an opportunity to see some of the things that Flipgrid can do, even if you don't get a chance to experience them firsthand today.
Yeah, there must be something going on, Randy.
Okay. Then sit back, relax for a moment, and come back to your Zoom screen if you are still having some difficulties. And we'll show you some of those features and see that so you can see what Flipgrid has to offer. So I'll give you a moment to come back to me here, and then we'll move forward. Okay. So as a teacher, as I log in as a teacher, it gives me the opportunity to create my first grid. And in this case, our grid is called IRE App Demo, which is our first course. And it gives you the option to create topics for students to respond to. So if I wanted to take a look at our first topic here, which is say hello on Flipgrid, we're seeing that some of us are already able to have already recorded responses. So thank you for participating. This grid, in this case, our stimuli here was this GIF animation. I was able to create the topic, which asks us to tell us a little bit about yourself and say hello to us. And you were able to record some videos as well as a selfie to share us a little bit about what your hello message. So as a teacher, I then have the option of clicking on these and seeing individual responses. I can also provide feedback.
Welcome to my office. And I can also do a blackboard.
So in this case, when Anissa made her drawing, I can click on her individual response to provide some feedback to her. So if I were to edit, I can edit a rubric and give her a score on her ideas and performance. I can also edit the rubric for another of other options with custom rubrics. If I were to go back,
welcome to my office.
You're going to get really annoying really fast the more times I refresh this. I can also have the option of submitting a video feedback. So I could say, hi, Anissa. Thank you for welcoming me to your office. And pause that and say next. And so she would have an opportunity to get some video feedback from me. Thank you for welcoming me to your office. In this case, I'm going to also take a selfie for you. Hi. And so now that Anissa has some of that video feedback and can hear a little bit about what any feedback I might have to offer. Privately, I can also give some feedback directly to her, and she can choose to receive that. I can choose to email it to her, or she will see that the next time she logs into Flipgrid. So all of those are possible options for responding to Flipgrid. But that is a teacher created topic, and that is the kind of the surface level. Some other things that Flipgrid allows us to do is it gives us this disco library, which is lots of different Flipgrids that have already been made for us. So for example, the Met out of New York has lots of grids that are already made. So if I wanted to take a look at making mummies, for example, and I wanted to click on that, I could add this to our IRE app demo. And take those settings. So yes, I like the idea of making mummies. It tells us a lot about, or a little bit about how mummies were made, and ask you to record a bit about how you would prepare for a long journey and what you would take with you on that long journey. I can choose to make that, give you a window on recording time. So the default is 90 seconds, and that's probably good for a lot of kids. Younger kids might prefer a little less time to start out with. The older kids might want more, but that's entirely up to you. I can also have the option for video moderation. So I can choose as the educator to say, before this video goes public, I want to screen it first to make sure that all the responses are on topic or on task and certainly school appropriate. I also have the option when I'm building topics, and this is whether I'm building my own topic or choosing one from the library, to add a media resource. In this case, it's a picture of this sarcophagus. I can also add topic tips to give them a few prompts. So make sure to tell me about your journey. When building topics, you can also attach things. In this case, this MET topic comes with a few different links right to the MET. So it comes with a link that tells us all about mummies, gives us a video, and it gives us another picture of a mummy with a portrait here. I can choose to add more. I can mark the topic active or not. I can choose different things that you're able to do with videos. So if you want to attach something, as I'm sure some of you already submitted responses, want to do, you're able to do that. I can allow or disallow students the opportunity to like videos. You have the opportunity to make sticky notes and color out with things. And I can also control your ability to, on this topic, make student-to-student replies or not. In feedback options, when I create my grid, I can adjust my rubric here. So rather if ideas and performance, I could add a criteria like tells me about the journey and says is detailed, or provide more detail than that, hopefully when you're making a really good rubric, and choose minimum scores and maximum scores from there. And once that is done, I have a brand new topic in our grid that you could record a response to. And as a teacher, I could choose to model and respond to that as well, or ask you to immediately start responding to that. Other things that are helpful to note within Flipgrid is the idea of mixtapes. So let me come back to our app here. And I know that there's a few that responded here. So one thing I can do is add some of your responses to mixtapes. And what a mixtape does is compile all those responses in a slideshow. So if I wanted to show some of the best thinking and I wanted to have some exemplars to show a little bit later on, I could make a mixtape out of your responses or out of some of the responses that either really highlighted some excellent thinking or some responses that showed us some examples of misconceptions, and publish that mixtape to people as well. I also have some moderation options. I can hide and delete responses here as well, and have a lot of those features for student safety and student privacy available to us to experience. The other thing I want to highlight as we draw close to the time here is the Grid Pals, which is Flipgrid's own social network that it has built. So within Flipgrid, you have an opportunity to make your profile private or public. You can see Flipgridders all around you who might be using it. And also, if I were to click on individual profiles, I could go ahead and see some of the grids that other people have made public and shared with me. So that's another way to share some of those pre-made activities with us. That said, so we've talked a bit about creating grids. We've talked about, I know we've had some trouble joining, but we showed off some of the feedback features as well. And that is really some of the bare bones background features of Flipgrid. But there's much less of a learning curve, I would think, to get involved with Flipgrid than there is Pear Deck, for example.
Learning curve for us, the adults, or for the kids?
I think for either. In this case, and that it only has one function, and that we record videos and we respond to each other. So once you know how to make a topic and you record videos, you can record videos and you can integrate different media and so on and so forth from there. So it gives us the opportunity to have some of those video-based discussions. Just as we mentioned here, as some of those threads start to develop in our responses. But we did want to give you the opportunity to participate in that. And we know there are some technical difficulties that we need to work out with you as well. So we're happy to do that. We do know that 4 o'clock is rapidly approaching though. And we do want to be respectful of your time. So we are happy to stick around, and I am happy to stick around and provide some more insight into Flipgrid after that time. But I do want to, for those of you that need to have a hard stop at 4 o'clock, I do want to move us forward to some closure here. So Flipgrid does have 2 excellent resources available to us. The one thing I do want to show you is the Educator's Guide to Flipgrid. So I'm going to move my sharing back over to my Google here for just a moment. The Educator's Guide to Flipgrid is a exhaustive Educator's Guide to Flipgrid that is 40 some odd pages that talks all about different ways you might use Flipgrid, gives you some more information about how to customize grids and provide some feedback as well. Gives you a lot of different tools to help make Flipgrid really work for you. So the equivalent to Pear Deck's Orchard and Help Center, Flipgrid has this educator guide. They also have a family guide available that you could use to distribute to students and give them a quick a crash course in how to access Flipgrid and work with you. Coming back to our presentation and marching toward that closure here, wanted to stop for a moment and ask you for some potential applications that you see of Flipgrid in your own practice. So please feel free to drop some thinking in chat before we move forward to the end of our session here. Anissa, what are some of the things you're seeing come up in chat about Flipgrid and how it might be used?
Well, sometimes in class we have kids do student presentations, and that doesn't always mean formal. It could be having them orally tell us how to solve a problem. So definitely having them do like student presentations where they have to talk how they solved it, sharing their favorite parts of stories, sharing their work and their understanding of a concept. I love that idea of sharing their work, because oftentimes that's what we have trouble seeing when we're remote. And for a more expanded form of response. The discussion boards in Google Classroom are great. This might allow some kids to have an easier time sharing their thinking, or at least a different way of sharing their thinking. And then also, of course, being able to share their own work, like reading their essays or poems out loud. So that's what I'm seeing so far.
Oh, that's one thing we've seen, especially at the elementary level, is we know we don't necessarily have the ability to give students a full reading diagnostic that we might do, a Fountains of Pinnell or whatever, what have you. But certainly getting some samples of reading via Flipgrid or other apps in student reading gives us some insight into where students might be doing well and where students might be struggling. Certainly not as well vetted or as some of those more formal assessments might be, but at least gives us some good anecdotal data about how students are performing. So there's a wide variety of applications, and I encourage you to consult the Discovery Library and find out a little bit more about what Flipgrid might be able to do for you, as well as that guide for educators, because there's a lot of good information in there about how you might use it. And certainly we're able to stick around here for a few moments after the session and talk about that as well.
Right. And Randy, one of the things that just popped up in the chat that I think is such a good point, and actually Julie and I were talking about that earlier, is the idea that, you know, this, for some of us, all of this Flipgrid might be a little overwhelming because we did go over it pretty quickly. But for the kids, it might be second nature because they love to make videos. They do TikTok all the time. So this could be a really good way to get them involved and responding in a different way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, we are slightly over time, but we do want to get one more piece of information from you and some thinking from you before you head out today. Either right now or pretty close to right now, there should be a feedback survey hitting your inbox, which allows you to tell us a little bit more about how we did today. I know perhaps one of the feedback items would be, well, I wish I had more time to talk about Flipgrid, but that's okay. We had a lot of time to talk about Pear Deck, and we're certainly happy to talk more about that. But please feel free to give us any other feedback you have as well. As you respond to that survey, we are tracking that, tracking responses to the feedback survey, tracking your PL hours and provide you certificates in June for those of you who need it. And one item on the exit survey is a response to today's exit ticket. And what we ask you to think about in the exit ticket is this question: what are some criteria that you use when deciding which app to employ in a remote setting? So we presented 2 apps today, Pear Deck and Flipgrid, that have some pretty different use cases. But in general, what are some criteria you use to make that decision? How do you decide what app will best fit your kids and their needs at this time? That said, I thank you for staying a few moments extra with me. I'm happy to stay a few minutes extra with you and answer any questions we have. I will turn it over to Anissa for any parting words she might have to offer before we open it up to the floor.
All right, well, thank you guys again, as always. A couple of people have asked for the slides because of the overview information that Randy went over, so we'll definitely send that out along with the video. And links to both Flipgrid and to Pear Deck in case you had an issue coming logging on to either one of those. But for those of you who want to stick around, we'll go through, I'll have Randy share his screen again, and we'll see if we can actually like log in to Flipgrid and go through that just so you see how that works, both for you and for the kids. But thank you guys. If you need to go, we completely understand. Have a great afternoon, and we're glad to see you. And we've got one more session next Tuesday. So we'll send out some reminder information about that if you're interested.
I know Anissa mentioned going back into Flipgrid and showing some of that. That might take a few more moments, but so I'd want to make some space right here for anyone else that has any more general questions before we dive back into that.
I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's so many of these apps and learning platforms. If you had to pick one, you know, what would you recommend?
Tell me more about your situation, Kristen. What do you teach and in what role?
Okay, I'm a 6th grade math teacher in a co-teach situation with special education. And, you know, now we've been doing the remote learning, which I'm really excited about. That's something I've always been excited about, is technology in the classroom. And in a previous district, I used to teach using Google Classroom starting with 4th grade. And that was great, but at our current district, we haven't had that same push for technology. So we are now, and we have lots to choose from. And I'm just wondering, like, if you had to pick one, you know, that to get really good at and to use consistently so that the kids were good at it, you were good at it, it was convenient, it was effective, what would it be? Just because, you know, I see, you know, so many funny videos are being made, you know, about just how many different apps and logins and websites for these kids, you know, and it's funny, but it's also true, you know, that, you know, it's like, okay, so for this website, password and log in to this app at 3 o'clock, and then my one teacher is using this, and probably more so for the older kids. You know, with the younger kids, we try to keep it more simple, but I'm just saying there's just so many resources, and sometimes it's just paralysis by analysis. You know, we just have so much to choose from. If you had to pick just one as an educator who's been immersed in the technology for a long time, you know, what would it be?
So for me, if I'm thinking from a school-wide perspective, and it sounds like that might be some thinking that you and your colleagues might want to engage in to help kind of reduce that cognitive load for both you and your students. Pear Deck is probably my one because it's multidisciplinary, right? And for those of our colleagues who are very more traditional instruction where they're more driven by lecture and PowerPoint, Pear Deck is kind of in their zone of proximal development. And for those colleagues who might be a little more innovative and are thinking about different ways to have those draggables and so on and so forth, Pear Deck allows that experimentation too. So if there was one I would recommend for entire faculty to get involved with, that is probably my one.
Okay. Okay.
And I think
appreciate
Chris,
your opinion.
yeah, and I think Chris, oh, I'm sorry. I think, Kristen, that if you guys are using like Google Classroom or something like that, like as the actual like learning management piece, then Pear Deck works well for that. And it also works for like that check for understanding. It works for kids to be able to responses. You can do it in a synchronous session if you're meeting in Google Meets or Zoom, and it can also work in asynchronously as well if they're just watching the presentation. So I think that's why it has it has a lot of flexibility in it that would go a long way.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.